Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking an incredible journey deep into the past to uncover the fascinating and honestly surprising story of ancient South Asian metallurgy. Now, if you think you already know the timeline of human technological leaps in this part of the world, you might want to strap in because the data we're diving into today is going to challenge some major assumptions. 2000. When we talk about ancient South Asian metalwork, our minds almost instantly jump to those spectacular, sprawling cities of the Indus Valley civilization. But here's the thing. Our story actually starts a full 2,000 years earlier than that famous urban peak. So here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, the earliest metal evidence. Second, Mohenjo-Daro's metal marvels. Third, the Great Ore Debate. And finally, Eastern India's metal journey. Let's get right into it. Section 1. The earliest metal evidence, or the cradle of South Asian metallurgy. We're talking about a massive geographic spread of early Harappan and Chalcolithic metal-related sites here. This network stretches all the way from Baluchistan in the west, way over to Rajasthan in the east. Ancient river corridors, like the Indus and the now-dry Ghaggar Hakra, essentially acted as the superhighways of the ancient world. They made the long-distance movement of raw materials and these brand-new metallurgical technologies completely possible. Our starting point is Mehrgarh, tucked away in the Kachi plain of Baluchistan. Excavations there revealed these tiny, seemingly modest copper beads from what archaeologists call Period 2, but it's the date that's absolutely staggering, 5500 to 4800 BCE. These little beads represent the absolute earliest archaeometallurgical evidence in all of South Asia. They prove that early communities were already experimenting with smelting, or at least cold-working native copper, right alongside the early adoption of agriculture. And again, this is a full 2 millennia before the mature Harappan phase even kicked off. It's just wild to think about. Moving on to Section 2. Mohenjo-Daro's metal marvels. The urban climax. When we fast forward to the mature Harappan levels of Mohenjo-Daro, roughly 2600 to 1900 BCE, we find an unbelievably rich collection of metalwork. We're seeing highly utilitarian tools like flat axes, which were super common. There are weapons like spearheads, brilliantly cast with central ribs for extra structural rigidity. You've got sheet copper vessels that were hammered and riveted together, plus beautiful ornaments like wire-drawn bangles. But you know what's wonderfully telling here? There is absolutely zero iron. This was an incredibly advanced, complex world built entirely on the back of copper and bronze. Now, these smiths weren't just hammering out flat sheets of metal. They were absolute masters of complex casting. Which brings us to Cire Perdue, or the lost wax casting technique. This is a highly demanding metalworking process, and Harappan smiths used it to create one of the most famous artifacts in the world, the iconic dancing girl figurine recovered from Mohenjo-Daro. She stands just 10.5 centimeters tall, striking this incredibly confident pose, and she is a perfect testament to a society that had completely mastered the art of metallurgy. So what exactly went into these alloys? Well, the bronzes of Mohenjo-Daro present a really complex picture. The smiths used a mix of relatively pure copper, arsenic copper, and then later on tin bronze. Why mix it up like that? The logic here is actually brilliant. Tin wasn't universally available in their immediate region. That means these ancient smiths were highly adaptable. They altered their metal alloys based on what they could actually secure through long-distance trade, and they specifically tailored the mix to the utility of the object they were making. Ancient supply chain management at its finest. Which leads us perfectly into Section 3, the Great Ore Debate, the supply chain whodunit. Because the burning question for historians and archaeologists is simply this. Where on earth did the Indus civilization actually get all its copper? To sustain that level of urban, industrial-scale metalworking, you need serious, reliable ore reserves. It's the ultimate ancient supply chain mystery. For the longest time, D.P. Agarwal's famous Khetri hypothesis was basically gospel. He pointed to the massive Khetri copper belt in Rajasthan, which is a mere 300 kilometers from some major Harappan sites. He even used spectrographic chemical fingerprinting to match the trace elements in the artifacts to those local Khetri ores. Sounds like a close case, right? Well, not quite. Modern science has totally thrown a wrench into that theory. More recent lead isotope analysis, which is pretty much the gold standard today, shows the provenance is actually quite ambiguous. The isotopic signatures could just as easily match ores from Oman or Baluchistan. On top of that, we have no direct archaeological evidence of Harappan-era mining at Khetri, and there's really strong evidence of maritime trade bringing copper in from the Persian Gulf. It's an ongoing, fascinating scientific debate that really pushes us to view the Indus metal supply as a highly complex, multi-source network. Okay, let's head east for Section 4, Eastern India's Metal Journey, the Eastern Frontier. If we look at Eastern India, the journey there definitely wasn't stagnant. It just had a steady, deliberate evolution of its own. Starting around 2300 BCE, we see the copper hoard culture popping up, featuring these large flat axes and harpoons right in the Ganges plain. Fast forward to 1700 BCE, and Chalcolithic sites like Pandu Rajar Dibi show copper being used more as scarce prestige items rather than your everyday tools. Then, by 1500 BCE, the Singhbhum district in Jharkhand starts showing evidence of small-scale copper smelting, right near the region's massive native ore deposits. And eventually, by 1200 BCE, during the Painted Grey Ware period, we see this fascinating, seamless transition right into the early Iron Age. Now, you're probably wondering, why is the early evidence in the East so sparse compared to the booming Indus Valley? It's a classic mix of environment and trade geography. The humid, tropical environment of places like Bengal and Bihar aggressively degrades artifacts over time. Plus, they were extremely far away from those bustling northwestern ore trade routes. Add to that the fact that intensive agriculture and urbanization took root a bit later in the East, and crucially, archaeological surveys in regions like Jharkhand and rural Bengal are still very much incomplete. We just haven't dug it all up that. This is where we really need to bust a major historical myth. As researchers rightly point out, the relative sparseness of copper-bronze evidence in eastern India prior to 600 BCE absolutely should not be interpreted as technological backwardness. These eastern societies weren't behind. They were just developing along a completely different trajectory. They were utilizing their own native resources in ways that would eventually lay the groundwork for major urban development, and for the brilliant Buddhist period bronze casting that the region later became totally famous for. So, I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought to chew on. Given that so much archaeological surveying in the East is still wide open, what hidden metallurgical marvels are still waiting to be unearthed in the humid soils of Bengal and Bihar? As future isotopic analyses come to light and new excavations break ground, we might just have to rewrite this ancient map all over again. Thanks so much for hanging out with me on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.